Hi, I'm Chuck Colson with this week's 2-Minute Warning. Back in July, I caused a bit of a stir on my radio program Breakpoint when I shared a dream I'd had about the collapse of the American economy and about the end of America as we know it, all because of our nation's massive debt. A lot of people thought I was being an alarmist. Interesting that at almost the same time, a respected British historian was foreseeing the end of what he called the American Empire. This past July, Harvard's Niall Ferguson was a featured speaker at the Aspen Institute. That hosts some of the world's leading and most liberal thinkers, and they usually exchange views on all sorts of topics, many of them with a view to making the world a better place to live. But instead of talking about improvement, Ferguson's topic was decline, specifically American decline. He shocked the audience, warning that the whole thing, fiscally and other ways, is very near the edge of chaos. And by the whole thing, he meant American preeminence, power, and global influence. Well, Ferguson ought to know. He lived through Britain's precipitous decline. And as an historian, he knows full well no empire has ever survived by financing its power through borrowing, through debt. Folks, this is something I've talked about before in the 2-Minute Warning. Eventually, the bill comes due. And for America, payment on the debt will be made in the form of diminished power, prestige, and our people's standard of living. This ought to be obvious. But I don't see much evidence that people really get it. Okay, the pollsters tell us the American people are upset and concerned about the debt and spending, but that tells us little, if anything, about what they're willing to do to reduce it. The average American is skeptical, maybe even hostile to government spending that benefits other people. But we love spending that benefits ourselves. Call it the beggar thy neighbor approach to deficit reduction. We say we favor smaller government, so long as what's left of the programs we benefit from. Unfortunately, avoiding the precipice that Ferguson warns about requires real changes in our expectations and a real willingness to give up the things that benefit us personally. And frankly, given our cultural trajectory, I'm doubtful we've got the will to do it. A willingness to sacrifice for the common good, or a belief in the common good for that matter, requires a kind of virtue that's in short supply in postmodern America. It requires nothing less than a rediscovery of the Christian worldview. As I've said many times before, and I'll say it many times again, we as individuals and as society must relearn the Christian virtues of self-restraint, delayed gratification, avoiding debt, and what we used to call the Protestant work ethic. We can no longer expect something for nothing. The alternative, as Ferguson reminded us, is decline and even chaos, which is exactly what we can expect unless we wake up. And this is why I'm spending my remaining years of ministry teaching Christian Worldview, building the Colson Center, running our Centurions program. I want to prepare a new generation of leaders who will make a difference in the culture by defending what they believe and by convincing others that the biblical worldview is the only rational worldview that we can live with and prosper. If Ferguson's right, we'd better wake up pretty fast. I'm Chuck Colson. That's this week's 2-Minute Warning.